Record is already on.
Okay, hello everyone. Welcome once again to a wonderful Wednesday webinar, the Climate Emergency Centre Network, an ever-growing network of about 36 centres around the UK, repurposing vacant property on the high street for eco and community centres. Tonight we have Amy Burnett, who is going to be talking. She is Dr. Amy Burnett, about valuing community from the Centre for Enterprise Environment and Development Research at Middlesex Uni. And she's talking about the Valuing Community Mapper, surfacing and celebrating the many types of value that communities generate. So over to you, Amy. Thank you so much for coming. Look forward to hearing. Over.
Yeah, it is great to be here. I have been interested and engaged in the environmental movement and initiatives in communities for a long time. I have been involved in things like neighbourhood planning and helping set up community energy groups and community land trusts, and very much involved in supporting kind of the creative arts locally and trying to celebrate heritage and all sorts of things. So there's lots of things that are in the mapper that are, from my own personal experience as well as various research and, as I'll talk to you in a minute, being embedded for a little bit in the Department of Culture, Media and Sport, which has a mandate to kind of look after the voluntary community and social enterprise sector. So I've kind of seen community from all sorts of different perspective, whether that's researching what other people are doing it myself, or being slightly embroiled in the various kind of discussions about what constitute the right community and in whose eyes is that seen. So value can be something that's quite subjective, but at the same time, what's the kind of types of value that we feel are important to us, while our specific kind of party political or a kind of individual moral preferences might be different. There are what I surfaced in the research, and maybe you'll agree, maybe you won't, is that there are kind of different value types, which I'll show you in a minute. So if you've got that link, and I'm not sure if they've joined late, whether they can see the link. Can everyone access the link to the document that is a Canva link? Okay, just pipe up and say if you need it, if you can't see it, and we can put it in there. So essentially this is a little document that you can take away with you kind of instantly, with some links and a bit of a summary about what's in the mapper and why it might be helpful to you. And also just to kind of caveat that this is today is the end of my British Academy project, which has kind of been developing this mapper. So it's kind of it's really nice to be having this talk today because it's a nice kind of finale to talk it through with you. And the environmental movement is very important to me as well. So if you can all kind of just click on that link, I'm not going to read every word, but you can just kind of get a flavour and I'll just talk through it. But I think it would be just good to kind of, I'll give a very brief introduction, but it would be very nice for us to kind of talk about what our key challenges are when we think about value, particularly, the questions of who gets to define it, how can you measure it, how do you know you're measuring the right thing, whether or not without kind of consultancy, etc., you feel that you can do it, whether it is onerous or whether it's kind of left to one person, whether it gets done routinely, and what would happen if lots of different groups started using a similar tool. So I feel it's really important to kind of have a tool that is free to use, that can support the community sector, because there is not lots of money kicking around for consultancy. So that was kind of like the premise, to feel that there is a tool that can help surface value, because knowing your value is a public good, is what I feel anyway. So Value in Community is an initiative that's been set up to kind of bring together the research that I've been doing on value, and it is including the British Academy work that I'll talk about, but also a few other things as well. And it is basically trying to understand value, regenerative economies, nature positive approaches, and also take quite an empowering approach to surfacing people's creative abilities as well to kind of think about how they can do that. So basically, I'm work at Middlesex University, but I also am doing some other research for the University of Birmingham and a few other things as well. So this research in particular is looking at value in the voluntary community and social enterprise sector, but it's also can be used by town and parish councils. It could be used by community groups, and local businesses as well. And it's been tested and co-developed with people from the community, input of local government, and also tech for good specialists as well as like having insights when I was based at DCMS. So that's enough from me for now before I talk to you about the mapper. But it would be good just to kind of have a little bit of an indication as to who has already kind of looked at the tool before I get going. Then I know how familiar you are with what I'm talking about. So can anyone just kind of put in the chat or raise their hand if they've already looked at the tool? Okay, cool.
I've had a look around the website, but I haven't used the tool.
Okay, that's cool. I think it's good to do these things with a bit of explanation as well. So before we get going on me talking more and talking about the tool, it would just be really good to kind of know what your value challenge is. Like, what's your experience of being in trying to share with your community, your funders, your stakeholders, what kind of value you contribute to in your communities?
Maybe I'll kick the ball off. Having done 35 years of eco community centres, we find that we do a lot of work for free, organising community events to particularly our charity Space Generators, and we help groups on the CC network negotiate meanwhile leases and for spaces, and it takes a lot of time and energy, and we do that for free. We don't always value it, and if we valued ourselves more, we might say, this is sliding scale, £10 to £30, £40 an hour even, for doing certain things, whatever it is. So how do we value that and quantify it? I think is a really important thing. I wouldn't want to charge someone personally. I wouldn't want to charge anyone 30 or 50 quid an hour, but it wouldn't be nice to value it and say this is worth £25. Therefore, we've done 10 hours. There's £250 that could be match funded. I'm interested in that kind of thing. Anyone else?
That's
Amy?
just can I just come back on that? That's just really interesting because sometimes that's one of the categories in the value typology which it's scaffolded on, because I mean I do lots of stuff for free as well, and it's not necessarily that you need to be paid, but it's just recognition that you have a worth and that what you're doing is appreciated and valued and recognized. And I think that helps people continue to be motivated. So yeah, I completely agree with that.
I think Kevin's got a hand up there, and if anyone else, you could use the heart-shaped react button down the bottom to raise a hand like that. You want to say something now, or physical hand? Kevin, Amy?
Yeah,
Kevin.
I think sometimes I think we come at this the wrong way. Having worked on an ERDF project about 10, 15 years ago.
What's the ERDF? Sorry, Kevin, define that.
It was the European Regional Development Fund in the glorious days of Europe integration. And I think what that did, that almost reversed it round in the fact that it was basically a digital outreach project up here, and I'm sure there's people on the call who already know the way it works, but it was the idea that we valued our time. There was a tender process that went out, and there was a pot of money then assigned. So, even going out and having initial meetings with some of the businesses to decide whether they wanted to sign up had a value on it. And at the end of each month, if we went out and saw, we had, 50, an hour meeting with 50 businesses, that would have a value of, I can't remember the exact figures, but say it was, 20 quid a meeting or something. And that would then go into the end of the month drawdown. So And then if the people signed up for the 12 hours support, that had a value of, I don't know, 700 quid or something. It would then, as we went through the project, it would then be looking at saying, okay, what's a job worth? So if we went back 9 months, a year later and said, yeah, a job's come out of this, then that would have a value and that would be drawn down from the pot of money. So there was already a funding there for people to get free support for. And I think that's what's missing a lot in the voluntary sector. A lot of the funders are not prepared to, for want of a best word, take a punt on a well structured bid where someone can forecast what's going to happen over the next 6 to 12 months and prepared to do a similar scenario where it's drawn down. Well, I suppose it does happen because you've got the reporting, etc. But that's usually at the end of the project. And I think a lot of the funders in the third sector are very stuck in their ways, and I think it's got to change. But I think the value aspect is that that value was already assigned before the project started or before the work started. So rather than going out and saying, okay, like you just said, Amy and yourself, Phoenix, that you go out and you've been doing work for nothing, rather than going back and saying, okay, what's the value of that? Maybe you sort of come at it from the other way of saying, okay, my time is worth X, and every time I go out, I'm going to make a note of that. Whether you get the money for it is another matter.
Okay, that's all helpful, Kevin. I think Amy, maybe, with this system we can quantify that. Amy, how do you want to handle this? Do you want to take a couple more questions, or do you want to answer each one as it goes?
I'll do each one as it goes, because otherwise I might forget. But I think that's absolutely fascinating. This kind of like valuing that time contribution, it kind of relates to the potential of the circular economy and time banking and lets and that kind of stuff. And also, a bit like the co-op card as it used to be, where you kind of like, you can generate an amount of something and you can either take it for yourself or kind of like give it to the community. But it's that kind of, quantifying it, drawing it down, allocating it, saying it's pro bono, but at least you've quantified it. I think that's really, really good way of doing it. And I was just wondering about the, how did they actually assess that the initial bid was going to work in terms of how they calculated things? And was that pre-assigned value, like who developed that methodology? Was it?
Yeah, that's unfortunate. I have to go back to the project manager. I was one of the consultants who go out and look at the businesses, so I wasn't involved in the actual initial tender. It was set up by the Liverpool City region, and it was a private company that won the tender. It was a company based up in Cumbria, who'd had apparently done similar projects up in Scotland, which is where, if you like, they managed to secure another tender. They did one. I think it was one or two up in Scotland, one down here, and another one I think in Cheshire. So they'd sort of, I don't know whether it had been a bit of a suck and see experiment up in Scotland to, if you like, refine the model. But the actual rates that, each element of the support was valued at, I'm not sure where that came from. I don't know whether it was a European standard or whether it was a Merseyside standard and it was different in Cheshire. But if you look back through the, if you look at the ERDF model, you'll see it's very much, there's initial engagement, there was the business assist, then there was the based on GVA improvement, which I've sort of started looking at and how I could try and adapt that sort of model for the third sector. So obviously, things like GVA, you'd have to adapt that in some way, rather than it being just based on profit and, depreciation, which is what that one was based on.
Sorry, what's GVA, Kevin? And then
it was gross value add. Sorry, gross value add, and for that, I think there's various models, but for that one, it was made up of the profit, the last account's profit, the payroll, and depreciation. You totted that up, you came up with a figure, which was the baseline, so that when the support started, you had a baseline to go at and say, okay, so say the GVA was 25 grand, okay, for a small business. If we did our support, if we went back 9 months later, we redid the measurements. We used to say to them, please say you've made at least an extra £1 in profit, and we can take it. There's a bit of a tick box exercise to some degree, but the principle, I think, could be really interesting.
That's helpful.
Yeah.
Do you want to, Amy, do you want to come back to what you were saying, or take Nick or Gavin's points there?
I think Nick's been very, very patient.
Yeah,
but I will
I'm very patient.
just quickly want to say that somebody, I can't remember who it was in the chat, but they did say that they did something around like the circular economy and regenerative biodiversity stuff. It'd just be really, at the end or later, it'd be really good to get their insights into how these value type approaches could link to what they're doing. But Nick.
Hi. I don't have a question, but I'm sort of going to support what Phoenix was saying earlier and just add a little bit more to it. I used to sit on the third sector board in Herefordshire. That was a few years ago. It no longer exists. So I had quite a lot to do with VCSE, interacting with public sector particularly. And I'm once more now engaged in trying to work as a voluntary, quote unquote, retired person, doing pro bono work in sustainability, interacting with the local authority, in this case Glasgow City Council, and realizing that some of what I'm running into is very familiar from what I was familiar with 15 years ago, which is that the public sector really struggles to recognize the value of anything that is not within the public sector and conforming to all its usual sort of procedural and protocols and stuff. Even though, for example, the project that I'm trying to get off the ground in Glasgow ticks quite a few of the boxes that I can find in the Glasgow city strategy, trying to make that case, not in terms of pounds and pence at all, but simply to get, a real recognition that what we're proposing to them is essentially helpful. And instead of which being sort of treated to, shall we say, a degree of, right, you're going to have to jump through 101 hoops before we actually listen to what you're trying to say to us. So in that sense, I'm very intrigued by what you're presenting, which I haven't had time to look at. I only found out about this webinar this afternoon. So anything that enables us to talk value, particularly with the public sector, I think would be immeasurably useful.
Cool. Amy? Anything on that? And then Gavin?
That's very cool, and I'm really pleased that you were very keen to come. So I won't say anything about it. I'll just show you the mapper in a few minutes, because I think we're gonna. When should we finish? Should we finish at 5 to 10 to, so people can.
5 2 is all right. They've got time to put the kettle on and watch football if they want.
Okay, so we've got half an hour. Gavin?
Okay. I've actually got a note here which I made while people were speaking. I'm not simply interested in us talking to public sector funders, but in us talking to each other, to the community talking to each other. I'm thinking about measuring value to each other, to the community, and to defined purposes. Not simply value for money, which is often value for institutionally defined rather than community defined targets. So I'd really like to know if this tool allows us to ask questions about what is real value as opposed perhaps to institutional value, and how does a community not only recognize but create value? And because value actually often lies in the ability to create value. So in a sense, I'm here to find out if the valuing community mapper measures any of this.
Cool. Thank you, Gavin. Back to Amy.
I would like to answer yes, and then you can let me know whether you think that it does.
Cool. Okay. Thank you, Gavin. Carry on, Amy.
So, just to check everyone has still got the link, and so we can kind of go through it together. But I'm just going to make a note of what you said because it was very good, and I was just trying to find my notes.
Amy, if you want, we can share screen. You can share your screen as a co-host. If you want that document shared, you're now a co-host if you want to open that document.
Right,
and then you can scroll and control what we can see. You just have to have it open on the right page.
Well, yeah, let's
if that's useful, or you can just
Zoom
talk.
is requesting the bypass of some private window picker. Hang on, content only. Let me just find. Hang on, I've got some. Why is it not doing that? Right, let me just get the screen up. It's not showing a. Don't want to show that.
I can share from my screen, and you can tell me to move up or down.
Yeah, could you? Because it's just
easier?
not.
All right, let's do that.
It's not showing.
Okay, someone else arriving. Let me just let me go from sharing my screen. Where's the document? Understanding the figures. That's the document, isn't it? Yeah. Are you seeing something saying understanding the figures? There we go. Right. Can you see this now, guys? To the top. All right. You tell me if you want to scroll up then.
So I'll just say move down, and so let's just start at the top. So valuing community, as I said, is something that because it's about valuing community. We started calling it, or I started calling it the VCSE value mapper, but because it's about community and it's much more beyond the voluntary community and social enterprise sector, we changed it to valuing community because then it can be aligned to the kind of brand, and there's a bit more aligned on that front. And as part of that, I developed a little strapline because I think, particularly going back to that point around feeling that you are empowered. And I've got a little exhibition on at the moment, which is about ecological citizenship based on some work that I'm doing. And also it's integrated into this, which is why I think it's particularly important for the environmental sector as well, is somebody interviewed me and they asked me who I found inspiring, and I talked about this particular person who was inspiring, and basically what they taught me was never wait for permission to do anything that you believe in, and and this is also kind of resonant of that quite empowering approach to understanding your value, because if you understand your value, you feel confident and you can celebrate and share together. And it goes back to the point that Gavin just said about, talking to each other, because once you name it, and once you surface it, and once you celebrate it, that in itself is an act of empowerment, and you kind of make your stamp on things a little bit more than being unsure and, am I using the right metrics or whatever. So it's in that kind of spirit that the valuing community mapper has been developed. And I wanted to do a little bit of an accompaniment document so that you've got a kind of Q&A and a bit of background about it, should you kind of use it and want to share it, because there are a few caveats with it at the moment because it's at advanced beta mode, and so some of the valuation calculations, some of them have got a range, some of them haven't, but we've used, because we want to kind of go into the next phase, which is, working with economists, working with local government, working with funders. There's a lot of people to keep happy. Putting a price on nature, putting a price on climate, putting a price on community. These are all very, very controversial things. So it's with that in mind that it's got a bit of a caveat as to its use and how confidently you can share some of the figures in it. But the overall principles about what it could do and how transformative it could be, and it's your view as to whether you think it answers some of the challenges that we've just talked about. So that's what we're going to go through now. But if you just scroll down a little bit, so there's a link there, so you can click on all these links. If you've got this link in your, and I think the lady that just joined a minute ago might not have the link, so if somebody can reshare the link in the chat, that would be really helpful. Otherwise I'll find it a bit distracting to do that and talk. So yeah, essentially there's a dummy CIC that was used to generate a sample output, and so there's a link there in pink, which we can go through together in a minute. But basically it's been developed by me with the support of Catherine Wilder from Keystone Ecological, who's a fantastic regenerative thinker who can make very amazing tools, and she's done a great job like animating my research as well. And because I was working with the British Academy, they have two relevant programs, one of which is the measuring social and cultural infrastructure, so particularly relevant to you guys in terms of like how you measure what is a social and cultural infrastructure, and the kind of the measurement around that. So they've got a whole framework on that, which is theirs, and we've sought to integrate that into the value and community mapper. And also, I'm a big fan of analog engagement, face-to-face engagement,
Yes.
celebrating, singing, whatever. But, the principles of a good digital society are really, really important in terms of how you can embed value in the algorithms and in the processes through which we do stuff. So it's not that kind of institutional value that was talked about earlier. It's proper surface value from the community. And the typology, which I'm just about to show you, was developed after my own experience of working in communities in Africa, in Brazil, in England, and also interviewing a lot of community groups and their supporters. So this was me looking at my interview data and having a light bulb moment outside Woking Station as I was preparing for a thing, and just the value typology was created at that moment. So this is very, very much community driven value analysis. It's not something I just made up, and it hasn't come from government. It hasn't, it's from the community. If you could, Seth, go down a little bit. So I just want to very briefly talk about DCMS, because it is a government department which is doing really, really interesting policy on culture, heritage, community, youth, and this is just an example of its areas of research interest in terms of like what I was looking at. So this is the stuff the government wants to know about. There's lots and lots of other things it wants to know about, and this is just the DCMS areas of research which you can click on. Other governments have their own. But, they want to know what social and economic value does the sector provide, what are the most robust approaches to measuring value, what's the quality and value of those services provided by civil society rather than other ones for the public sector or the private sector, what's the role of preventative services and outcomes, how do you measure the savings, who and to what extent does VCSE delivery of public services, does it lead to better outcomes of people and communities? So, this is very, very relevant. And so, when there's a kind of, people think that the government might be not doing something or looking at something, it's not that they're not interested in it. There's a value kind of fog going on between what the community is generating on the ground and the policies that are trying to understand and support that value. But there's a few things in between that are not meaning that it's particularly clear in some cases. If you can go down a bit.
Yeah.
So the value typology. So the word typology is one of those words that you have to hear a few times to know what it means. But it's kind of basically, it's a way of classifying a thing, a phenomena, and it can be in a table, it can be in a list, and it's kind of like a summary, and then it has an explanation, and that's basically, it's a categorization approach. And so what I did, and you can see it in a table form or you can see it in a bullet form, they're pretty much the same, but the one in the table form, if you go down to the table form, which is just below, you can, these are the kind of categories which I have been looking at, which came from my interview data and just listening and hearing to kind of, what I was, when I was at DCMS, and the kind of values that were being talked about or maybe not being talked about so much. And what would it mean to understand value from that particular perspective? So you have the monetary and cost benefit analysis, which is the one that we know often kind of wins in the arguments. But as we've just said, sometimes it's just nice knowing what your value is. And that kind of links to the second one, which is the recognition, reputation and appreciative value. So, I have my work with parish and town councils in the community sector. Sometimes the word thankless task is or people getting burnt out because they're just, they're not feeling appreciated and thanked. And it really, really makes a difference in those kind of, positive reinforcing value loops, which is something that the mapper tries to integrate. And then a capitals perspective. So people talk about human capital, social capital. We talked about number of hours worked and volunteered and that kind of stuff, or the natural infrastructure. There's also the kind of the cultural and social infrastructure, which the British Academy have been also interested in. But culture also relates to improved governance, and we have sociocracy, we have hierarchies, we have all sorts of different ways of doing things. And even if you sign up to a certain governance model, some people, they may kind of have more influence than others, or it might change and it might not work. So having an understanding of the value of your governance is also really important, as is the assets of an ownership, because is the asset that you are, particularly in the context of devolution and asset transfer, is that actually supporting, is community ownership actually supporting more value or not? So is it, going back to that question that we just looked at from DCMS, is community, is something done by the community better or more efficient, or delivering a different type of value to non-community? If you can go down. The value chain perspectives are, lots of people talk about social value, and now we have the 2023 Procurement Act, which specifically seeks to include small and medium-sized enterprises and the VCSE sector more, which is a great step forward. But often, trying to work with the VCSE sector at scale, it's kind of not quite there yet. So, it's that kind of, by being in somebody's value chain, that purchasing procurement process, what kind of values can you influence by being a part of that? There's lots of stuff talked about Scope 3 emissions and climate change and net zero, but what about the social value Scope 3 results as well? I'm not wanting to kind of go through the tables, because I know it's not particularly, going through a table isn't that exciting, but hopefully this is interesting. The personal value and meeting intrinsic objectives. So it's kind of, it's a bit different to the being appreciated. This is like your reason for living. To what extent is what you're doing honouring why you exist on this planet, or the person that you want to become, and how is doing good also elevating your own personal sense of self-worth and contribution, and that you're moving towards certain things. So that's really important as well, as is this idea around regenerative value. So in the mapper, and this is kind of like circular economy stuff, positive tipping points, the world of Tim Lenton, etc. So the regenerative value is like a value loop. So if you can also get degenerative value, like the negative tipping points idea, but let's talk about the positive. So you can get positively reinforcing outcomes. So say, for instance, you smile at people and you put on a good event, and you just go that extra mile to kind of care for people and care for the environment, that will have positive cascading effects, particularly if your incentives can be designed around that kind of approach that recognises the positively reinforcing value loops. And the policy influence and outcome. So, it's not just about having government influence on government policy, it's also how much you influence an organisation, another organisation, or the local town council, or the local authority, and are you actually co-producing policy rather than just being consulted? And so it's that kind of, based on what you do and the value that you have and the views that you've had, how much does that then lead to an institutionalisation of community value? So that's the typology. So I don't know if anybody's got any quick questions, because we've only got 15 minutes, but I can continue explaining it.
Shall I stop the share there and start again, see if there are questions? Is there anyone with any questions on that so far? That was interesting. I think we had Tim Lenton on, and he talked about social tipping points, and I wondered about social value to social tipping points. How we can accelerate that. Is there any questions on that bit now? Anyone want to pop a hand up? Chris Poynton, over.
Thanks, Amy. One of the things I've seen in some sort of local initiatives, thinking about like local currencies, for instance, you talk about value kept in a local community versus value extracted from a local community. I'm wondering, in your sort of valuing types, how that I can see the capitals one might sort of intersect with that. I was interested how that might work, because I think part of a lot of voluntary effort is that it keeps value very close to the sort of delivery as opposed to taking it elsewhere.
Yeah, I think it's every the 70p extra generated per pound, if it's kind of like within local. I might not be. I saw a figure similar, but it's like, you know, the local economic multiplier kind of effect. And so, yeah, I mean, when you kind of look at the regenerative value loops, and I'm pretty sure that there is that kind. I'm pretty sure that there is something about that in there. And if there isn't, I'll take it away and make sure there is. So we can go through the mapper, and I can just remind myself whether that's in there. But given that I'm very interested in regenerative value, I'm pretty sure it is. But we can have a look.
Okay. Any other questions at that point, or do you want to keep going and show us the mapper stuff and then take last questions? Yeah, show us the mapper stuff's probably best at the time we've got. Is there anything?
Okay, well, if you put the document up, I'll just say a few more little things, and then I'll show you the mapper, because then you'll have to do it again, because I couldn't work out how to do that.
Okay.
One shot. Yeah, so basically, like the benefits of the mapper, I'll just quickly say what they are. Oh, those bullet points, yeah. So it's a multidimensional approach to surfacing VCSE value, which is based on the typology I just shared with you. It surfaces value that's typically invisible to or excluded from standard measurement framework. So not many people are kind of looking at the appreciative value, for instance, or meeting intrinsic personal value. Introduces regenerative value as an emergent system level characteristic, supporting organisations to identify self-reinforcing cycles of value creation. As I said, it integrates some of the British Academy's important work. It supports system change by being a rapid diagnostic tool for value contribution. So it's not something that you don't know where to start. It's already kind of a tool that's there, and it takes about 25 minutes or longer if you want to talk it through with your team. Obviously, the more you put into it, the more it will have to kind of work on. It is an AI-enabled tool, and you know we all have concerns about AI, water use, the environment. For the time being, there is going to be an offline version, but just to kind of be able to show what it could do, it's using AI at the moment, and it's kind of like helping to articulate value and value for intelligence. So I know somebody who is manages a creative organization, and he actually said it helped them think more intelligently about what they were doing, because they were seeing it from a completely new lens that they just hadn't thought of before, which I thought was nice. It's cross-referenced against some established frameworks. It hasn't got everything in there, but you know, it's got some of the key ones. It's informed by an in-depth experience with community work, grounded in real-world understanding of policy at different scales, and it's designed with devolution in mind. So that's the kind of the claims that I think it benefits. And it's up to you to tell me, whether or not you think that's the case, what needs to be done to improve it, etc.
The last one you just mentioned, built with devolution in mind, because I know Andy Burnham's supposed to be coming in and wants to empower devolution more. You just expand on that a few sentences. Built with devolution in mind.
So I've been doing quite a lot of research on thinking about how this definition that I'm about to show you below, ecological citizenship, can scaffold the measures and metrics and governance for inclusive regenerative devolution. So I've got a policy brief coming out on that, and so it's kind of thinking like, how can we use a really robust, locally driven value understanding to kind of help think, okay, so council tax, like, are we actually thinking about council tax the right way around? Are we thinking about how local funding works? Are we kind of designing our programs and our funding around the right kind of process to actually surface and support some of the value that's important to us and that's often overlooked? So that's what I mean.
Okay, cool. All right, keep going with it. Is it ecological citizenship?
Yeah. I'm not going to read that out. You can look at it later because it's too many words to say, and I've already said a few. But basically, there's a definition of ecological citizenship, which I had the pleasure of reading out in Lewis the other day. And it's kind of, this is integrated in it as well. It's kind of thinking about how we can attune ourselves to natural systems and cycles, and recognize that there are universal laws going on which kind of govern our social systems, and we need to work with nature, and there's a level of function, and so this definition of ecological citizenship actually informed these archetypes for systems change, which I've also integrated in my LPIT research, which are also in the mapper. So there's a few more things just down here which you can read it in your own time, but I will just very, very quickly skip over because I want to show you the mapper. So if you just scroll down a little bit.
Yeah,
that's just that kind of little disclaimer about how to use it and treat the figures, and this is a little bit more around what the confidence ratings mean, how the figures are worked out, and we're going to work with more economists and funders, etc., as I said, and using the figures responsibly. I mean, what we don't want is to kind of communities to kind of say, oh, we generate 5 million in value, but we haven't necessarily completely tested that with everybody. So it's just indicative, and everybody who uses the mapper just needs to be in that, you're participating in a process to kind of work out what value, how should value be calculated, and so that it meets kind of the needs of a consensus around meeting people's needs. So I just want to kind of caveat
all
that.
right. So it's like co-creating something there together. Should I stop sharing there?
Could you go to the top and then find that pink link?
Pink link. There we go.
Pink link.
There we go. Beaming you in. Over.
Thank you. So this is a made up CIC, but it's in a real place, because basically what the mapper does is it's got the typology, which the one I showed you is a 9-dimensional one because that's what I came up with. But to make the architecture of this thing work, Catherine from Keystone Ecological made it into 16 categories and did a bit of back end shifting, but it doesn't mean to say that what I just showed you is substantially different. It's just a kind of technical rework. So this is, and I know we've got less than 10 minutes for me to, and you'll need to kind of want to ask some questions. So I'm just going to really quickly show you this, and you've got this document, you've got the link to this, but I'm just going to let you know what's in here. So you'll get a value intelligence report that looks like this, and this is basically helping you understand what your value superpowers are. Some of it's quantitative, some of it's qualitative, and it's after 25 minutes of filling it out also, then you will get this report. So if you go to your story,
yeah.
So basically, you'll say your mission statement and a few others, and it will retell that back to you about what you do. And some of it you will know, but some of it might be like, oh, yeah, that's what we do. So if you go down to a new lens on your work, so this is kind of just reframing something that you kind of that you're doing by kind of showing the whole stuff that I'm saying I've justified about not being on the balance sheet and the reinforcing loops. It's just kind of reiterate that to whoever's looking at it. The value nobody counts. So based on what you've put into it, it will then feed that back, and the things that are being missed by maybe yourself or by your funders or whoever. So if you just keep scrolling down into the different categories. So this is where it kind of comes up with like a figure. And as I said, we need to be a bit careful with the figure at the moment because it's not a completely final tool, it's beta mode, etc. But it gives you a range of what your annual value might be, but is not being measured, and like how it's established. So this might be improved mental well-being, community cohesion and intercultural exchange. On to the next one. Reduce youth unemployment, food poverty alleviation. Wow. And each of these have kind of got like confidence levels. So where the data, the inputs that are measuring that value are really high or not. And so, just be a bit cautious on the low ones. You could be a bit more confident on the high ones. But as I said, the actual financial valuation is just a guide. And so this is quite important because it kind of says like, if you close tomorrow, what would happen? And it just kind of feeds that back to you, for instance. And it's just quite good maybe to have on the wall or, and just communicating that to whoever you need to communicate it. This is like a regenerative score. So it's like the compound, because that one there had loads of different things that it did. And they're all like, reinforcing something positive. And without them happening, if you just took it away, it would make a big difference. So This is your what makes you powerful. So if you just click through, because we haven't got much long, I'll just, whatever you click through, I'll just keep saying that's ecological citizenship, and these archetypes that I mentioned, which come out of the definition. You've got like the elder, the steward, and sometimes the stewards can work well with the leveler, as it just says. So the leveler is all about justice, and the steward is the person who kind of like looks after things. And so, but sometimes, like, you know, to innovate at the growth edges, you need the artists and the weavers and the dancers and that kind of thing. So it goes into that. How to kind of cultivate regenerative community ecosystems. So, you know, what is the superpower that actually enables you to contribute to regenerative community ecosystems? Yeah, I mean, I think given the time, and then just go down to the other value loops, maybe the value loops. Yeah, so out of the different contributions, you can, it kind of maps like how these value loops are operating. So there's a well-being, participation, policy influence, there's a knowledge, community, ecosystem, resilience loop going on. And it just kind of helps you to understand that, and also what category of the value typology it lends itself to. Just flick through a couple of these because we haven't got long. Yeah, so so that kind of gives you a score out of the typology. As I said, it's been expanded to 16. It's kind of like, what are your really strong things, and where things may be seen as weaker, but even though, you know, whose view is
so any of our community groups can go through this in 25 minutes, and it will give them a rough estimate of the value of their community work and input in different areas and narratives. Brilliant. That's really cool. And that could then be put to funders as this is an estimate of the work we're doing. That's brilliant.
Yeah. And then also, if you do anything related to infrastructure, which you guys do, if you go to number 5, number 5, just unpack that. So this is about the kind of assets and activities. If you don't do anything to do with assets, then you won't get this bit. But it kind of says about underneath, it's like, you know, your infrastructure role and what the value of the infrastructure that you contribute and the steward, etc. is. And particularly you guys, I'll be really interested in seeing whether this is helpful or not, and to feedback to the British Academy about their social and cultural infrastructure framework as well, whether or not that's helpful to you.
Well, I'd really like to see. Sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to say really. What's that?
It'd be great to go through with with the CC network another time to actually show, because a lot of it we're doing is helping groups to provide infrastructure for a whole alliance of other groups. So yeah, great stuff.
Exactly. So then there's stuff here around your strategy. So this is like some next steps for you. So based on what is generated, knowing your value, now what? Okay, so it's kind of like some just like it's just, that's kind of referring inbound, outbound things. So and then it's also like your strategic landscape. What's this recognition gap? Yeah, so I think that's the kind of, what you're currently doing, what you notice but isn't being tracked, and then, you know, what you can do to track it better for a monitoring and evaluation process. And then the next move is the strategic kind of things that you can do as an organisation based on what this tool has said. And then how we worked it out is a bit about the methodology, which will have more inputs to change like how the calculations are made. But that is the value mapper. So I welcome your thoughts, and I know we haven't got much time to talk about it. I'm sorry about that, but I'm very, very happy to do another chat, you know, if particularly people who've actually used it, and then get people's feedback and improve it, and maybe work with local authorities or funders in partnership with you. So thank you.
All right, that's brilliant, Amy. I think there's loads in there to unpack for a lot of groups. I don't mind carrying on, you know, past 8. Some people may want to beam off and go see the football. Have you personally got time to go to 5 past if people do want to ask any other questions? All right, well, thank you very much for that. Really, really comprehensive, and it really shows the massive amount that people are doing in our communities that could be mapped and could help with things. So if you've got a question, a comment, or feedback, there's a little heart-shaped icon down the bottom there. If you want to stick a hand up, ask a question, a comment, or feedback, do that, and we'll put that through to Amy. So any questions there, folks? This is really exciting, because I think if we did this for the space generators and the CEC network, it would be very, you know, clear the amount of work we're doing unpaid that is supporting all this physical infrastructure where so much other social value and change happens. And we tend to do it without putting a monetary value on it, and to give our time and energy and love, as I'm sure a lot of folks out there doing things are as well. So it would be good to be able to go back to local council, to government, to funders and say, we've actually put in £1.4 million worth of support for infrastructure. Over to Nick Sherwood and the Hereford team. And anyone else pop your hand up. Over.
I did actually put this question in the chat, but it seems to have gone up page. Have you had any buy-in yet, or sort of desire on the part of local government, city councils or county councils to actually engage with this, is one question. And the other thing that occurred to me while you were talking was not just to do this for one organisation in any particular sort of location, but to do it for a whole range of, for example, sustainability orientated organizations, so that you can actually put a value not just on one entity, but on a whole sort of subset of activities. The one I have in mind is sustainability activities. You're muted.
That is exactly what I want to do next. I want to do place-based, and I've got interest, tentative interest. It's just capacity, and the fact that I've run out of my funding now, and everything I do is kind of also voluntarily. So I need to kind of get some funding to kind of enable me to actually really spend a lot of time on this, so that I can take it to a local authority, parish and town councils, because I'm very interested that it meets the needs of rural and smaller communities, which are very important, and not everybody in an urban area always notices them or understands them. So I think that's really important, and also just like, a whole county, and then how that could be scaled up to kind of getting support from these higher tier entities that are going to be created in devolution. So I think that's really important, and I'd love for the environment and sustainability to be one thing, and there seems to be some kind of interest in health and well-being as well. So it's kind of just like getting everything aligned, but I have had lots of interest in it, so it's just kind of like now making a plan and choosing which direction to go in.
So you're not actually working with any local authorities yet?
I've had, so local authorities have been interested to the extent that some of them have come along to some focus groups that I had, or technical walkthroughs, but I haven't, I've been talking to individual towns, because I just want to kind of start relatively small. So I haven't, because it would require an amount of funding that I don't have. So I've engaged with there's a borough in London which is potentially interested. So as yet, it's still kind of like me just making a list of people who are interested, but no, not yet. So if you know of anybody who might be interested, and you could help with that would be cool.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you so much for that. That really, it is really important to really value ourselves in, how much there was one of the comments there just about how much we bring to community, and linking people together and creating that social value was really important. People don't put a value on it enough. The work we do, shall we say, that changes lives, that makes connections, that brings things together. And what's exciting here is, Amy can help scale things up to policy shifts and things, if we can quantify this, the work we're doing. Is there anyone else who wants? I know there's probably somebody want to beam off of football, and I've got to upload this to YouTube, and I'm in the new Walthamstow space where it's very hot, and we're working on getting this place ready for a new climate emergency community centre.
Just wanted to, can I chip in quickly?
Oh, yeah, go for it.
So I've been listing in transit, so it hasn't all gone in, but I'm pretty sure that this is something that will be very much of interest to the Charwell Collective that runs out of Banbury, and we're sort of like offshoot of them now, because we're hoping to go into a relationship where they're going to be they're going to provide the employment kind of mechanisms, because we're just a little lowly public limited company, the One Planet Abingdon Climate Emergency Centre. But I'm very sure that I'm going to raise this at our steering group meeting tomorrow night, and hopefully get them to drop you a line, Amy, because I think that they'd be really interested. I know that Jess and Carol, that are working on employment and valuations and funding bids, would be really interested in your work.
Cool.
Thank you, and I'll just put my email in the chat. I'll also put it on that document
Brilliant.
as well, and hopefully you've all got that link. And I'll probably, because it's a live document, I might just kind of like add a few little tweaks here and there, but you should have everything that you need on there to kind of then reshare it. And there is I'll add this as well, which is a feedback form. So I'm really, really keen that people test it and then let me know how, because otherwise I won't know how to improve it if people don't feedback. So there is a feedback form. It's not very long. So yeah, but I mean it's an open invitation for us all to kind of help surface and support each other's value. So I really appreciate your time and that you haven't run off to the football yet.
All right. So thank you everyone very much for coming. I think we should probably wrap it up there because there are some people who want to probably hop to football or whatever else they've got to do, feed the cat or the kids or whatever. But really, really interested tonight. I think it's really, really important to see the visible and the invisible work that goes on in community. There is so much that we all do, from tea and conversation to being welcoming to well-being to stopping social isolation to whatever it is, by creating these community spaces. And one classic little example I'll bung out before handing back to Amy, just for any parting comment or anything she wants to share. But I think the government during the time of austerity, they closed about 50 youth community and music youth centres kind of thing, particularly about 8 in Tottenham. Some of the youngsters were complaining to us about. And that now, whatever it is, austerity, that Occupy time about 2012, they closed, so many public buildings, 400 plus libraries or something. And now, about 2 months ago, I see on the news that the government says, oh, we're putting 50 million now into setting up 50 new youth centres, because they realised by having closed all these youth centres, they've got all these extra social problems and issues that they had to deal with that wouldn't be as expensive if they'd left the youth centres open in the first place. So how do we actually prove the case that they should be leaving this community, cultural, arts, craft, music, youth, spaces available to us and not close them down, so they don't have to give 50 million 12 years later because it's cost them 500 million dealing with all this stuff. Anyway, let's start valuing the work we do in many different ways, folks. So thank you everyone tonight. Over to Amy for any parting comment or anything. People can contact you if they're interested more, and how can we move this forward? We can share that document with people. Over.
Thank you. I have put my email in the chat, but the government sectors that you basically just said are really important, like the civil society and youth directorate and DCMS. They kind of responsible, I believe, for youth centres, and then also the kind of cultural value and the heritage, that's also a DCMS thing. And I think it's really I want to kind of continue the conversation on shared metrics that go beyond silos. Like MHCLG works on certain elements of community and planning, and DCMS works on certain bits of civil society and culture. And although we've kind of had mission driven government and that kind of stuff, I feel that the kind of values that need to be reaching government should be coming from a community informed analysis and the voice of community. So if there's anything that we can do to kind of verify that this tool works for you, and to kind of have any testimonials and that kind of stuff, I think it would just be really helpful to keep pushing that message.
Great, let's do it. Let's link up with Amy and spend 25 minutes of your time, whatever community group or project, and let's network it, get value to get the spaces open. All right, see you next week, folks. Keep networking solutions wherever you are. Thank you very much, Dr. Amy Burnett. Keep up the good work.
Thanks very much.